Hello everyone and welcome to our class from a distance, cours à distance. So today we're just going to focus on um, sentence patterns, right? And of course, the reason we are doing this, as we saw last week, is to really make sure that we have a firm grasp on nominal functions that we associate with verbs, right? Okay. So I'm going to assume, it seems as if you all understood this pretty well, that when we talked about the intransitive pattern, where something like he wept, we have he is the structure of that he is, the personal pronoun he is going to be a noun phrase and the function will be a subject, right? So with these five sentence patterns, right, we associate different nominal functions, right? He kicked a ball. If I have the noun phrase, a ball, structure, noun phrase, function, direct object. And then we call that the transitive pattern. He slept is the intransitive pattern. Um, if we have the, and now what I'm going to do is, I'm not going, we saw those patterns. I just want to talk about some difficulties, right? Yeah, a few things, for example, that might not appear to be as obvious, because I want to make sure that I've given, the examples that we've looked at have been very much prototypical examples, but sometimes we might come across sentences that don't look like they're the same, but I'm going to hope to show you that they actually are. Okay, so first of all, if you remember, we have something called the copulative pattern, right? And the copulative pattern is best illustrated with a sentence of the type, "He is a doctor," right? Something like that. So we might, because of this, this sort of we become very attuned to the most typical copulative verb, which is to be, right? Because if you remember, copulative means we're kind of just yoking two things together, because we have co-referentiality. He is a teacher. He refers to the same thing as a teacher, right? Okay, so that means we call this this copulative verb. It just really serves to link these two things together that are in a sense equivalent because they refer to the same thing, right? And to be is sort of the most obvious of those verbs, but try to be aware of the fact that there can be other verbs that can also be what we would say en français attributif, copulative, but it might be less obvious. Something like became, right? He became a tyrant, right? Become just indicates the passing of one state to another. So the passing into the state of being a tyrant, right? And once again, here we have the complement, the noun phrase, a tyrant. It's the structure. That's the noun phrase. The function will we have the copulative pattern. The structure will be a subject complement, or if you prefer, a subject predicative. Just like we have in the sentence, he is or was a tyrant, right? Okay, so be aware of the fact that we can have other verbs. Now, what I should be saying is you will have noticed in this for this week's lesson, there are some exercises, right, on sentence patterns, which I ask you to, first of all, just identify all the noun phrases in the sentence, identify their function, and then, of course, give the corresponding sentence pattern. In a sense, what I'm doing here is giving you advice on how to identify those cases, right? For example, if you look at, I'm looking at these exercises here. We have part A and part B, right? Let's just say that what I've just said will hopefully help you do question A1. Okay, all right. That's all. Similarly, to help you with A2, very often with the complex transitive pattern, we be wary of sort of hidden versions of that. Like the most typical complex transitive pattern we've seen is, I called them a liar, right? Okay, but I can sort of saying I made them I made them presidents, right? I made it so that they were presidents. That's going to be complex transitive. But I could also have other things like I appointed them, right? There's a lot of different other kinds of verbs, so be aware of these. There are these kind of cases here, so try to be aware of that. Okay. Another thing to be aware of is that here's the thing we're going to spend the most time on, because I think this is the most difficult thing. Another thing, yes, is that when we talk about either subject complements or object complements, or subject predicatives or object predicatives, that we encounter in the copulative pattern and the complex transitive pattern, these complements, right? We've looked at examples where they are noun phrases, but we can also have adjective phrases be these. Not only we can also have prepositional phrases, but we're not going to be so concerned about that. There are other structures that can have this function of subject complement. For example, I can say he is nice. Okay. So here, notice here we agree that I can say he is a man, he is a nice, and I can say he is in the park. I apologize. My guess is this is not as clear as it should be. These are difficult conditions. It's actually at night. The lighting is not very good. I am sorry. I hope you can read it, but I will just sort of spell it out for you. He is a man. He is nice. He is in the park. So here we have three different complements to the verb to be here, and we're using to be because it's the most obvious, right? And in the first case, you will have noticed, and because they're all kind of equivalent, all the same function, as you're aware, here we have our subject complement, right? Okay, we'll just write suj comp, right? Now, obviously, in the first one, but now notice we have different structures. Here, the first one, we're all familiar with this. We have a man, we have man being the head noun, being the determiner. So a man, the structure is going to be a noun phrase. I'm going to write NP. Here we have nice, and this nice is going to be an adjective, or if you prefer an adjective phrase, AP. Right? Okay. I can say very nice. We can. I'm not going to review the structure of an adjective phrase, but let's just suffice it to say that this is an adjective, right? Okay. And we can also have a prepositional phrase. Now, to review the structure of a prepositional phrase, here we have our head preposition. We've seen this, right? Followed by the nominal complement, the park, right? And that means we have preposition plus nominal complement. Oh, that's a prepositional phrase. So that's a third structure. So, all right, PP, right? So, with subject complements or subject predicatives, there are three possible, we've sort of really concentrated on the fact we have noun phrases, but just to I would say remind you, or to make you aware of the fact that not only can we have noun phrases being subject complements, but we can also have adjective phrases and prepositional phrases. Okay, that's one thing. You will encounter examples of this in the exercise. I just want to make sure that we don't have this sort of superficial, sort of too much of a restricted idea of these sentence patterns that would prevent you from being able to know how to what's going on in sentences that are a little bit different, right? Less kind of middle of the road. Okay. Now now this will lead us to the most difficult thing that we are going to see, which is a little bit arduous. I must admit it's a little bit it's difficult, and it takes a little bit of time to understand, is the fact that we can, in certain cases, there's a thing called that en français we call les verbes à particules. Verbes à particules, and we're going to call these and typically we just call these phrasal verbs. Okay, phrasal verbs, and these are difficult. This is a good thing to pay attention to, because this is really what makes your English, extremely authentic, but it's really difficult to sort of get a hold of. Now, there's many that you're really familiar with, wake up, take care of. So what we have here, we have a verb, wake, followed by we have wake followed by up, right? Now the difficulty is, right, is that this up can either be an adverb, or we could say adverbial particle, or it can be a preposition. Up. That up can either be an adverb or a preposition. So the question is, and that will lead us to having, if we have an adverb, we're going to have one sentence pattern, and if we have a preposition, we'll have another. For example, if I say I woke up, right? Here we can say, okay, I'd say we have I woke up, right? Here we can just say, we have the intransitive pattern. We have a verb with an adverb, as we've seen, right? It's basically saying how I woke. Usually up indicates this idea of completion, something being sort of fully, I would say, accomplished to the utmost extent, right? I'm fully awake, in a sense, right? That's what I woke up means. So here up is sort of giving us information, circumstantial, if you will, information about this event, waking, right? And it becomes fused with it. Now you're aware of the fact that you don't say wake down, you don't say wake across, right? This becomes sort of a fixed expression, right? And in so doing, it becomes what we call a phrasal verb, right? So in this case, we have a phrasal verb with an adverb, right? And we would say that we have the intransitive pattern, right? So it's important to note that, of course, up is not a complement of the verb, right? I mean, it's not we're not going to say that up is the direct object, or no, because up obviously doesn't have a nominal role. Now that might be fairly obvious, but sometimes so we have some phrasal verbs with the intransitive pattern, right? Okay. And we only have the verb and followed by an adverb, right? But there are other cases where we might have noun phrases after the what is often an adverb, and that can lead to confusion. So we're going to look at we're only going to look at one example that if you understand it, you will have understood the gist of what this is about. I can say, for example, we're going to stick up with up. Now this pen, I'm going to get a replacement for this pen. Okay, so we have, not right, it's not great, but okay. So I can say I looked up a word, right? Okay, and I can say I looked up a tree. Now, I understand this is really not going to be legible. I would be amazed if you could read this. It's kind of difficult to make this. I'm going to work on this. Hopefully next week this will be better. I didn't realize that the quality of the image would be so bad. So we have two sentences that look very similar on the surface, right? We have I looked up a word, and the other sentence is I looked up a tree. Okay. So here, notice we have our verb followed by up, and then we have a noun phrase, a word in a tree, right? So what I hope to show you is that there's a difference in structure, and it's going to lead to, in one case, a word is not going to be a complement of the verb, right? And in another case, another noun phrase will. And so how does that work? So here, if we say I looked up a word, first of all, right, as we've noticed, looking up, first of all, up doesn't say where I'm looking. Looking up really means chercher dans le sens de chercher le sens d'un mot dans un dictionnaire. These two things become kind of, in a sense, the meaning becomes fused. And this is sort of gives information about how I'm looking, right? And so what we notice is so that's going to make this adverbial. It's going to be an adverb. And since this is just an adverb, right? Okay. That means a word is going to be our direct object, right? Okay. We only have a verb and an adverb, and then this following noun phrase is going to be the direct object. It's what we were looking up, right? And notice we can kind of prove this because I can switch the order. I looked a word up. If up is an adverb, I can switch it with the following word. So I can say I looked up a word, yes, and I can also say I looked a word up, and there's a third test, which is if we replace a word with a pronoun, we have to switch the order. I looked it up. You can't say I looked up it, right? Okay. So if we have an adverb here, and that shows that this noun phrase immediately follows. That's what happens with direct object. It immediately follows the verb. It's affected by it. Affected by it isn't really a real criteria, but in this case it is. It is what is looked up. So here we have a word. This noun phrase is going to be the direct object. So, because up is an adverb, right? It's just sort of something that it has an adverbial function, right? It's not sort of getting in the way of the relationship between the verb and its direct object, right? Now, with this example, it looks similar of I looked up a tree, right? We have something different is at work, and it has to do once again with the here. There's something that's interesting and that you haven't probably been aware of yet, but which comes into play is the fact that up can actually either be an adverb or here it's a preposition. Okay, so if it's a preposition, that means, as we have seen just a moment ago, that it will form a prepositional phrase with the nominal complement. Okay, and we can actually show this because this forms a unit. Up in a tree, they're kind of fixed together, right? We can't separate them. So unlike what happens with I looked up a word, here I can change the order. I looked a word up, but here I can't. I'm not going to say I looked a tree up, right? Notice up, by the way, keeps its spatial value. It's saying where I'm looking. I'm looking up a tree. I'm not. Whereas with I looked up a word, sort of becomes kind of fused in a sense. It's sort of just a part of the verb. Here, this up is saying where I'm looking, right? Okay, so it's independent. It is not kind of fused into this, sort of independent of looked, and it's more strictly associated with the nominal complement, right? To form, because it forms with the nominal complement, a tree, a prepositional phrase. Now, because that's a prepositional phrase, okay, it's a tree, the function of a tree, right, is part of the structure of a prepositional phrase. It's in the prepositional phrase up a tree, so its function is going to be complement of a preposition, right? Okay, so therefore we have preposition followed by a complement of a preposition. The structure of that is a prepositional phrase. Up a tree, structure, prepositional phrase, and the function of that is going to be adverbial. So strangely here, that means we just have I looked, and we're saying where I looked, right? Okay. That means this sentence pattern is we only have an adverbial sort of circumstantial, right? Essential but circumstantial, saying where I looked, complement being up a tree, right? That functions as a whole because we have the structure of a prepositional phrase. And in this sentence we have the intransitive pattern. Okay, so to sum up, here we have and the preceding sentence we have I looked up a word. We do the test. Can we switch it around? Yes, we can. I looked a word up, and we have to if a word is a pronoun. I looked it up. Since we can do that, that shows that a word is a direct object, right? That means we have the transitive pattern. Now, in this example, here we have up, which retains its original meaning of direction, right? Okay. Here we have I looked up a tree, right? We can't switch the order. We can't do it. We can't say I looked a tree up. It doesn't work, right? Okay. That's because up and a tree are joint, or it can't be separated because they are a prepositional phrase, right? Which means since up a tree is a prepositional phrase, the function of a tree is going to be complement of the preposition up, right? And up a tree, that structure is going to have a function. That function is going to be adverbial. It's saying where I'm looking, right? Which means we have subject verb plus adverbial means we have the intransitive pattern. So when the particle or the word that follows in the phrasal verb, when the word that follows is a preposition, we have the intransitive pattern, which is an adverb. We have the transitive pattern with the following noun phrase being the direct object. That's the gist of it. I hope if you understand that, that is impressive. There are examples. You have to do the test. As far as I said, as trying to change the word order. It's important to have a test. That's going to be the determining factor. So have fun with that. And once you've done that, you will have really understood all the difficult examples. And this is going to. I mean, this isn't. This is. I mean, this is really, to be honest. If you understand this, you have. Your level is already high. It's a tough little test. But knowing this will help us to avoid confusion when we get to big, nasty sentences that we're going to get to towards the later in the semester. So for this week, just keep looking at the documents. Trying to really review your our nominal functions. You can sort of look at that big Excel sheet to get your head around. Or we looked at that clauses. Review these kind of things, but make sure that that you can do these exercises, bring them into class, so that we can make sure before we plunge. We are already starting to plunge into nominal clauses, but before we do so, I will make sure that you are square with these nominal functions. So take the time to do these exercises. Really, identify these noun phrases, determine their function, then just say, oh, that means that we have the such and such a sentence pattern. These are difficult. These ones are kind of limit cases. I'm kind of if you might not be able to find answers for all of them. We'll discuss them in class. So, but these are kind of purposefully difficult. Okay, so it'll make you kind of stretch your mind out as to being able to identify nominal functions. And so have a good week, and I will see you next week. Take care.